What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a movie that was released in theaters recently, and I did not know a whole lot about the movie outside of the fact that it was a coming of age movie, which is one of my favorite subgenres of film. I love coming of age movies, and that it was a coming of age movie set in 2008 in the MySpace early Facebook era, with a lot of music included that was very much a part of my life in that time period. I wore my Fallout Boy t-shirt today, but there was a starting line poster in this movie. Motion City soundtrack was played, Paramore references, an Under Oath poster. I was going into my senior year of high school in 2008, 17 going on 18 years old. And so to hear that a movie took place in this time period that was so rooted in a lot of the things that were important to me as a kid, I was very excited to check this movie out. And the film I'm going to be discussing with you today is Didi. Didi is directed by Sean Wang. In 2008, during the last month of summer before high school begins, an impressionable 13-year-old Taiwanese American boy learns what his family can't teach him: how to skate, how to flirt, and how to love your mom. So I was very excited to watch this movie. Like I said, 2008, I was getting ready to graduate high school. So this kid in this movie was younger than me at the time period, but very familiar with the world that it's set in. And I absolutely loved everything about this movie. It's like one of those movies that I've stated before that feels like it was perfectly made for me, like catered for someone such as myself. And I obviously love the world that it's set in. I love this 2008 era, probably because I was thinking about being younger. I'm going to be 34 years old this year. I'm starting to feel older. And so reminiscing on an era where my hair was 3 times as long as now, I wore pretty much all black clothing. Very much a different looking Nate than you see before you. Aside from the black, I still wear quite a bit of black. But I was excited about that. But what really took me by surprise is the authenticity of the emotion in this film. It does not feel like a scripted Hollywood project. There's no real hallmarky dramatic blow-ups in this movie. It's a relationship between a family that is showcased in a way that the emotion is so palpable and realistic that it moves you the entire time you're watching it. And I'm very excited to tell you about this movie today. So at the beginning of the film, we are introduced to Chris, or Didi, played by Izaac Wang, who has a couple of nicknames that his friends know him by, but his mother refers to him as Didi, his sister calls him Chris, and all of his friends call him, I believe, Wang Wang is what all of his friends at school call him. And we see him early on making these videos for YouTube where, like in one video, he's blowing up a mailbox and running away from this old lady's house. And he's very interested in skateboarding. He watches a lot of skateboarding videos on YouTube. And we can tell that he's really fascinated with his sister. They're clearly brother and sister, so they're fighting consistently. But he takes an interest in what she likes. He's listening to her music. He's constantly wearing her clothes. We see her room, which is what I said. You see the starting line poster, Under Oath poster, Paramore, Panic at the Disco, all of these bands that were pretty heavy in my life in that time period and still to this day. And the two of them kind of butt heads. And we see Chris in his friend group, and they hang out all the time, but Chris still deals with a lot of things surrounding his friend group. He's kind of pushed to the back. He's relatively soft-spoken in comparison to the rest of them. And even throughout the film, not only in his friend group, but people he comes into contact with, he experiences subtle forms of racism with what people say about him, certain remarks, and we see that early on in the film. And we're also introduced at the same time to his mother and his grandmother. His mother was played by Joan Chen, who was actually in Twin Peaks, which is the coolest thing in the entire world. But his mother is very passionate about painting, and she loves to paint, and she spends all of her time trying to pursue her art. But her husband, Chris's father, is overseas doing work. He's never at home with the family. He's constantly away. And the grandmother that lives with him is actually Chris's father's mother. And she is very hard on Chris's mother about the way she runs the house and the way that she approaches things and how she needs to be a real mother. And if it wasn't for him, if it wasn't for the father, there would be no money, there'd be no rule in the house. And so we get a lot of her desire for something else in her life, despite being put in this situation where she's a homemaker and has to keep the house together. And the entirety of the film is watching this young kid, Chris, just experience this time in his life in between middle and high school and all of the challenges that arise in this time of his life. So, like I said, this movie was phenomenal. I loved everything about this movie. For starters, though, the performances are excellent. Izaac Wang, who plays Chris in the movie, he's such a believable character because all of the emotion he's experiencing, you get so much through quiet moments of solitude. Kids at that age aren't necessarily the most expressive when it comes to their emotions and not always completely willing to just put that out there, whether that be to parents, closest friends, brothers and sisters. And his character has moments where, whether it's what he's typing on the computer or, things he's writing down or what he's thinking to himself, you can just feel those emotions so viscerally rather than being expressed through expositional dialogue. And I really appreciated that about the movie, and I thought his performance was exceptional. Chen, who plays his mother, is also incredible in this movie. What's really interesting is I went into this film thinking that it was going to be solely this coming of age movie about this young boy, but it's so much more. A lot of it is about motherhood and about a relationship between a mother and a son, and we get a lot about her experience. And it's really interesting because not only can you understand it from just the perspective of a mother and a son, but there's so many cultural implications incorporated that I think are really, really relevant and interesting to see, whether that be the way other people from their culture that live in this area of California approach their kids going to high school, and the importance of education and getting started early, where in this case, Chris's mother is way more concerned with him being happy and living the life that he wants to and pursuing the things that he wants, because she's trying to do the same thing in her own life. She wants to be an artist and she's very talented, but every time she submits her work somewhere or tries to put anything out there, it doesn't work out in her benefit. And it's such an interesting contrast to see this person who is a lot more well along in years, who is still trying to find themselves, in comparison with this young boy who is also trying to find himself at a time period where you're going through puberty, you're trying to understand your interests and what you want to pursue. And I thought the dichotomy of those two people's lives paralleled next to each other, and the fact that they're mother and son, made the film so much more interesting. I also loved the relationship between Chris and his sister, because I feel like so many people, I grew up in a family with 4 kids. I was the oldest of the siblings, and it was interesting. I have 2 brothers and a sister, and when I was growing up, our relationships were all very different. I have a brother who's a year younger than me. I have a sister who's a few years younger than me, and I have another brother who's about 10 years younger than me. And so the ages are all over the place. And so our interactions were all very different growing up. And there's so much silent communication through siblings in like a way that only you can understand with the relationship you have with those people. And this movie captures it in a very brilliant way. Like, these 2 siblings in this movie love and adore each other, but they don't express it verbally very often. It's so much more through the actions with one another. And they're constantly bickering and fighting and treating each other terrible, but there's so much more going on under the surface. And I love the way that the director portrays that relationship. And the same with the relationship between these kids and the mother, and these kids and their grandmother, and how there is a love that holds them all together, but there's all of these little things that separate them in the day-to-day that cause conflict. And I think that's so real of just family and how family operates. And like I said, I really enjoyed the incorporation of the cultural elements in the film, because obviously, not being a part of that culture, I don't know a ton about it other than things that I've seen in media or read about online. But I think it was interesting the way certain things were conveyed, especially surrounding education, or the subtle racism towards people, where people would have these one-off remarks about him being Asian and saying certain things in a way that feels very awful. And Chris just kind of has to let it slide. He doesn't say anything about it. He's even so embarrassed that he lies about his own parents, and like saying that he's half white, almost being embarrassed that he is a child of 2 Asian people. And so I think that the way the movie approaches racism is really interesting, because it's not heavy-handed. It's just incorporated into the day-to-day life, where you can feel it in a very realistic way to the way those people are feeling it. You can see it on screen and be like, wow, this has got to be awful to experience. And I love the way that the director incorporated those sequences, and I thought that they were really thought-provoking and well executed. The movie is very well shot. I love a lot of like the cuts to the handheld video camcorder just really does a great job at enhancing the aesthetic of the time period. Obviously, you get shots of MySpace and Facebook and old YouTube and all of the things from 2008 that if you were a child of that time period, similarly to me, it'll bring back a lot of memories. And I liked that a lot. And I think a lot of the relationships between Chris and his friends are conveyed in a way that makes sense for that age group. And I had a smile on my face the whole time in this movie. Especially there's a scene with him and his mom in the car where Motion City soundtrack starts playing, and I got kind of emotional thinking about that time period and the type of music that I was playing. And it was a beautiful experience. And this is a movie made by someone who it was clearly a passion project for Sean Wang. He did a phenomenal job with this movie, and I really hope he gets the opportunity to make a lot more because this movie is amazing. I would recommend it to anyone. If it's in a theater near you right now, please go support it. So have you seen Didi? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I loved this movie. It was like a warm hug. There were emotional moments, but I just had a smile on my face the whole time, and I cannot wait to watch it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.